Welcome. This is a video of a summary of the UK government's Mindspace document, which is on how to influence behaviour. If this concerns you, as it does me, then please continue to watch. What is it all about? The Mindspace document, which can be found at this link on the left-hand side, is a document produced by experts on psychology and human behaviour. It is a document that you can see from the subtext on the right hand side is a document that's looking to influence behaviour through public policy. Now, I'm presenting this as a concerned member of the public. I have experience of these various elements and I wish to present it to you so you can decide for yourself if you think this is something that our government should be doing. So the video contents. This video is going to look at the 9 pillars of coercion from the document that are used to influence people's decision and opinion making processes. We're going to look at how they're being used. We're going to look at an example of their use. We're going to look at suggestions to combat the effect if that's what we need to do. And we're going to look at, really summing up, that the narrative is being affected by public policy, which in turn is influenced by other special interests. The government has spent a lot of taxpayers' money on advertising to implement certain policies, and we really always need to question those policies. Let's take a look at a few quotes from the document to give you a taste. Influencing people's behaviour is nothing new to government. Persuading people to change their behaviour, their lifestyle or their existing habits. Build our capacity, ensure that we have a sophisticated understanding of what does influence behaviour. This slide shows a list of those 9 pillars down the left hand side with a description. In the next part of the video, we're going to look at these one by one. Element 1, defaults. People generally go with the flow of preset options. So how is it being used? Well, basically, the options that have been provided are assumed or presupposed to be ones that we want. This reduces significantly people's ability to question them. They don't realise that they've been provided with an option that's been assumed. There is also the ability to create a river of propaganda from media and government, and people get swept onto this river and they get engulfed and they just go along with what everyone else is doing. So an example of how this is being used is in a BBC article. They asked the question, when will it be your turn to get the jab? Now, they're not asking, is it right for you? Have you weighed up all the options? Do you have informed consent? They are just assuming and presupposing that it's something that you need to do. So people get taken along with the current. So the ways to navigate this is to learn to ask the unasked questions without triggering an emotional response, gently question or share stories to relate to people, and really avoid swimming upstream. It will cause many problems. And what we mean by this is pushing too strongly against the ideas, or even the strong ideas, and start with the smaller ones, will enable us to question this much more effectively. And really, you want to get an agreement for people to step off the river for a moment and just assess things. Element 2, the messenger. We are strongly influenced by who communicates information. How is it being used? They make those communicating the narrative seem like good people and the experts. Those question the narrative as painted as bad or crazy people. This assists in the divide as people tend to listen to those in their group. Studies show if the person sees you as not in their group, they will likely dismiss the information that you are presenting. It's also being used in letters and messaging where they say experts recommend, but they don't say who the experts are often, and they often don't say why they recommend things. This is the picture portrayed as the people supporting the narrative, and this is the picture portrayed as the people questioning the narrative. The ways to navigate this is do not allow yourself to be put in the box. If you accept the term when someone calls you a conspiracy theorist, they will then dismiss everything you have to say. So the first thing you have to do is establish that this is not the case. If you are called a COVID denier, respond with, I am skeptical, and in fact many, millions are too. And most importantly, we have to first show someone that we're on the same side before they will evaluate the information we provide. If this does not occur, they will dismiss and ignore all the information we provide nearly every time. Element 3, incentives. Our response to incentives are shaped by predictable mental shortcuts such as strongly avoiding losses. Well, how is it being used? Huge losses will occur if you don't follow the rules, provide incentives for following policy, and lots of virtual signalling everywhere. An example, if you don't have it, you cannot go on holiday. So most people that I spoke to have decided to have the jab in order to go on holiday. Not that they feel they need it or to protect themselves. So this really begs the question, is that if that informed consent? We have a carrot and a stick. And of course, this is a difficult one to navigate, but possibly we can point out the blackmail, or we can design alternate incentives or negate the ones being offered if possible. Element 4, norms. We're strongly influenced by what others do. How is it being used? Well, to make out that something irregular is actually normal, the new normal, pretend everyone is doing it and behind it, and make it appear weird or strange if you do not follow the norm. A particular example is the mask mandates. The evidence is weak at best, yet people are vilified for not complying because they see everyone else doing it. And of course, this picture sums it up. I don't want to know where we're going, but from the look of it, it's got to be good. So there's really this crowd mentality. And of course, history shows us that this is not always a wise idea. The ways to navigate is to counter with important exceptions to the rule. Provide examples. One that I've used is I'm a member of many health conscious groups, have large numbers of people on them, and there's a very low uptake, which does question what are these people thinking. And of course, you want to appeal to people's uniqueness. And of course, whatever you believe, I think it's really important that we have informed consent and people understand all the elements of the arguments. Element 5, salience. Our attention is drawn to what is novel and seems relevant to us. How is it being used? The virus is portrayed as new and dangerous, and some experts have questioned just how new it is. Coronavirus has been around for a long while, and how dangerous it is to everyone. It affects everyone with lockdowns and face masks, so we can't really avoid it. So it's relevant to everyone in the country. Increases market share, available customers for products since everyone is affected. And no one has been able to ignore it totally. So you could argue no one in this country has been able to avoid the pandemic. An example is the statement, you could be a super spreader as healthy people can spread it. There's certain literature that questions this. However, you're not allowed to question it. And of course, this meme with Leonard coming in saying, I did a bad thing. Then Sheldon says, does it affect me? Leonard replies, no. And then Sheldon says, well, then suffer in silence. We don't tend to really pay attention to things that are not relevant to us. So ways to navigate. Well, we could show certain information and question whether it's novel and the fact that it may only affect a minority of the population. If it does only affect the vulnerable, which a lot of the data suggests, the protection should be focused. Element 6, priming. Our acts are often influenced by subconscious cues. Well, what do we mean by this? How is it being used? Well, overtly, for example, signs are everywhere. So the subconscious cue is we see a sign and we just follow what it says. It's being used covertly in hypnotic suggestions. The messaging is everywhere. Example, keep distance. So people are effectively adjusting their behaviour from a piece of paper taped to the floor. And the signs are up everywhere to do various, change our behaviours in various ways. Of course, the ways to navigate is people can produce counter messages if they believe that they're not sound in their messaging. We can bring into the awareness of what's going on. And of course, people will do leaflets and other media. Element 7, effect. Our emotional associations can powerfully shape our actions. How is it being used? Well, there's a campaign of fear, The release stage notes highlighted this. There's a conditioning of good and bad people with emotive reasoning, so people then feel very emotional to certain people, and direct blame from policies to actually blaming those that question the narrative or are not following all of the rules. People celebrating an experimental medical procedure. Now this is a little bit odd. I would have assumed that the most that, regardless of what your beliefs are, the most that people should do is have some relief, but to actually be excited and celebrating it, it's very strange. An example of the effect with emotions is look them in the eyes and tell them you didn't follow the guidelines. And another one is act like you've got it, which is very strange, telling people to act sick if they're not. So the ways to navigate is really we need to avoid triggering emotions in each other, otherwise it's very difficult to have open and honest conversations. We want to elicit rational conversation, and we could elicit higher values in people than the gossip being propagated. So we could say it's important to question things, isn't it? And once we agree to that, then we can go from there. And of course, finally, which is important, we need to know what people respond to. Element 8, commitments. We seek to be consistent with our public promises and reciprocate acts. How is it being used? Well, it's getting commitment on small actions or ideas. A classic example from studies is petitions. So if you make a signature, you're going to change your idea and self-image around that particular subject and be much more likely to agree to a larger request later on. Unquestioned commitment leads to compliance. And of course, effectively training people to be compliant and not ask questions. And now we have in towns compliance ambassadors walking around making sure that everyone just does as they're told and not effectively thinking for themselves. So an example is clapping to the sky. So effectively this is once you buy into this and once you agree to this, you're going to then support that idea. And of course, combined with the norms element, which we looked earlier, is the people that don't follow this will then stand out, and numerous of them have received abuse for doing so. So it's really about commitment and compliance. Of course, ways to navigate is we can use it as a remedy by assessing a higher value to show, how important it is to question things. And it also can be used to set boundaries of a conversation. So we could say to people, okay, well, let's both agree to be polite, open, and, courteous. And once we do, then we will follow that. Element 9 and the final one is ego. We act in ways to make us feel good about ourselves. So how is it being used? Well, they're bigging up the experts, and once the experts' egos have been inflated, they are much less likely to challenge the narrative, making heroes of those supporting the narrative, and of course the virtual signalling and craze that's occurring nowadays. So people showing off about all following rules and effectively trying to influence others to do the same. An example, support our heroes, and of course those that are receiving this kind of attention are going to be quite reluctant to challenge this. It reinforces the ego, and of course the ways to navigate it, we need to be aware of the ego and work within boundaries, and it's really not wise to challenge someone's ego as they're going to be unlikely to be quite rational. So now in summary again, this is the complete list. Effectively, these are ways that we take shortcuts in our thinking, and a lot of them are quite useful. However, if they're used by people to influence us for those people's benefits rather than ours, then they can be used in really unethical ways. So it's for us to understand these and then make the decision whether we agree in the way they're being used, particularly by those that are working for us. So I hope this video was of use to you. I've made it as a concerned member of the public. If you would like to email us to get in touch, you can do so at info@reachingpeople.website. And really, I advise that we always question and think for ourselves. And hopefully this video has helped you do so regarding this document. Thank you.